What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Kelly Thompson. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
I am so excited to talk to you. You work on Captain Marvel, Black Widow, fantastic. But I, I mean, Black Cloak lately. Then you got Birds of Prey. You're doing a GI Joe book with the Energon universe. Like you are, you have a wide library of work.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you hope you're sort of diversifying so that
Mm.
people feel like you can do almost anything. Like, hey, I can write no word, it's Jeff comics, and I can also write horror adolescence in the call, and I can write a sci-fi fantasy, detective thing with Black Cloak, and I can do big superheroes. Like you hope that's what's happening, but like I know I worry sometimes where you're like, well, yeah, but what's she really like? What's her thing? Like
I
just to pick someone incredibly great as a counterpoint who's really like, not that they haven't done a lot of stuff, but I think, if you ask someone about what does James Tynion do, you're like, oh, that guy is the master of horror.
right.
Like all sorts of horror, he has got it down. Like trapped in a beautiful, idyllic location, done. Stuck inside the dark web, government conspiracy. Like he's just got it. And so, kudos to him. First of
Yeah.
all, I'm a big fan. He's
Oh,
written some
right.
of my favorite stuff over the last years. And, also kudos to him for finding all the all the areas of horror, right?
Right.
Because something is killing the children feels completely different than the deviant, which feels completely different from Nice House on a Lake. Anyway, I didn't need to make
No,
this a Jane Sidian
but
podcast, but
you're right. And then take World Tree, like it
yeah,
and
it's
Blue Book,
yeah.
like there's so
So
many.
I think when you look at someone's career like that you're very impressed by, and who, I mean, James is younger than I am, I'm quite sure, but he's really come up very fast and he's done stuff that I think people ahead of him and behind him and with him are pretty like, wow, that guy really nailed it. And so you look at how he's doing it and you go, wait, am I fucking up by writing a bunch of different stuff? So I hope that it's I hope that it's going to keep me available and flexible for a lot of projects for my
Right.
whole career. But, sometimes you do want to hone in on something. And sometimes I worry about that a little bit. But I got to be honest, I'm having a really good time doing all of them. And I don't really enjoy, Birds of Prey more than It's Jeff or The Cull more than, I mean, it's always a little more fun to work on your own stuff just because you own it and you don't have to worry about that as much. But I really, everything I do, I really enjoy it. I don't take it if I'm not excited about it.
Yeah, well, I think you have a crafted a great way of a lot of stories that I've read of yours. You have characters that are relatable, or like I don't even want to say like make slice of life, like your interactions with your characters, whether it's a superhero, whether it's a detective in Black Cloak in the fantasy world, you get drawn into their stories really easily, and I think that is something that is not always the easiest task to do.
Well, thank you. It is something I work on because it's become very clear to me as a writer of, maybe it would just be clear to me, period, as a writer, but I think specifically working in comics and seeing the way people respond to characters they love and that they've loved for decades, it really does seem to be the key. And I don't think it's one many of us have mastered, mostly because it's hard to do that. Like the only way to do that and have complete control as a creator is if you manage to make someone fall in love with your creator owned property the way someone loves, Wonder Woman. And that's like such a huge ass. She's been around since the 40s. I don't know my
Right,
dates. A long,
a long
long
time.
time. And like sometimes you get real breakouts like what Hellboy and Spawn and things like that, but that's incredibly hard to do. And
Yeah,
it was, no offense to Spawn and Hellboy, who I both think are great, and there are reason those are the first things I thought of, but easier to do back then as well, I
right.
would say. Less, not that the 90s wasn't a very loud time for comics, but there's just so much on shelves, and there's
Yeah.
so much variety on shelves and access to everything from manga to Western comics is, more than it's ever been. And so it's just a tough marketplace to compete.
Yeah. It makes sense. And what I love already about this conversation is one of the first things I always ask a creator is, have you always had a love for comics? And it sounds like you have a love for comics just from our little bit of talking.
Yeah, yeah.
Has that always been there though?
Well, my first real comics were Archie digests that I would find in the grocery store, like checkout line, and beg my mother for incessantly. So I had a ton of those and I loved them. And they often get sort of short shrift in the how did you discover comics, because they were like a childhood thing and I was not aware of other comics. I wasn't aware there was this whole world of it. I wasn't aware there were comic shops. I didn't know books. I knew nothing. I was a child, so I don't really give it a lot of weight in that respect, but I do think it's important because a lot of people who have no affection for comics, it's because they weren't introduced to comics at a young age. And so when you're introduced to comics at a young age, you learn how to read them. And it becomes second nature to you. And not everyone, but a lot of people who read them young will develop an affinity and affection for them that, you can find if you discover them later in life, but it's much harder.
Yeah.
And we're all so busy. Like when I think, like, that's the perfect example to me, is that when my books were coming out on Wednesday, I couldn't think of anything except for my books. And the one of the biggest fights I ever got in with my parents was because I was a newly driving teenager and I wanted to drive in a horrific snowstorm to the mall after school at night to get my comics. And they were like, we'll get them tomorrow. And I was like, tomorrow? It sounded like the furthest thing away. And, as an adult, you just can't keep up like that. Like,
Yep.
I have books that I feel maybe not that powerfully about, but very powerfully about. And I'm just, you're busy, you have responsibilities, you have a lot going on. You just can't totally become obsessed with them the way kids become obsessed with things because you've got too much going on. And so I think there's a key part of this of getting people reading comics and finding a love for it sooner. And so that is a really long answer to Archie's were my first real comics, but I didn't discover comics that we sort of think of as Western comics, American style, until I was a teenager. And that came about, as so many people around my age, from the X-Men the animated series. We discovered that, and then like a week later, that's what it is in my mind, a week, but it could have been a month. I don't know. My brother came home from the mall jumping up and down with Uncanny X-Men 290 that has Storm on the cover. And he's like, it's the girl from the cartoon. And I was like, oh my God. And like, that was it. I was done. Comics were my favorite thing on earth. And yeah, my parents' whole lives changed then.
Right.
I mean, mine too, but yeah, I'm sure they were like, what has happened?
I that's so funny. Like, because I can always tell, I'm like, when a creator is the same around the same age as me, I'm like, oh, X-Men, Batman animated
Yep.
series were our
Yep.
gateways into
Yep.
comics.
Yep. They
And
worked like a charm, man.
and look, now here I am sitting in my basement talking to comic creators with a bunch of books behind me. So
It's
it did
I
its job.
comics is it's a funny thing because I wish all the time that comics were more mainstream
Mm.
uh in Western society. I mean, certainly I think manga has achieved that far better as far as having a toehold in the culture and as a respected part of the culture that comics in Western just doesn't have. And I wish all the time that we could have it, especially because I know we'd get more and even better stuff and maybe people could live better lives instead of the grind that we're all sort of stuck in. But I also, there's something fun about not everybody else gets it, like, even as the world becomes superhero fans from movies and things, something that I desperately wanted also when I was a kid. um I don't know. I wish more of those people would read the comics, but since it's not going that way, it's it's nice. It's nice that it's an art that not everybody
Yeah.
appreciates. It's like going to a museum. And I know that people don't want to hold comics up with that same level of craft. And certainly there's a ton of shit out there, but I'd offer that there's a ton of shit in a museum too. So,
Yeah.
it's fit to taste, and it's beautiful. I love comics.
Oh, I do, and I love, and I love what it does, and how, like, getting my kids into reading comics and getting to see their kind of,
Oh, that's
they're
great.
familiar with a comic shop, like they,
Yeah,
we go to it, they're familiar, they know that,
that's
so
great.
it's so cool to kind of see that
Yeah.
kind of, it's, you want it to grow, but you're also like, it is
Yeah.
our thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's a bit of like it's sort of the cold comfort I take that this industry is so tough, is that at least it's like a cool thing that you get to feel part of a
Yeah.
special group of people who really understand it and get it. I don't have kids, but I have two nephews who are both wicked smart and just just really great. And I was like delighted when there were nephews brought into the family, or nieces I would have been fine with too, whatever, some child that I can force all the comics on. And so, I mean, every year, Christmas and birthdays, it's comics. I mean, they sometimes get other things too, but there are always comics, and they are more well read at, I mean, my God, if they've even read half of what I sent them, and I think they've read most of it, they're so ahead. I wish someone had been shoving all of this down my throat. I'd know so much.
You're like, what I could, when I actually had the time as a kid, what I could have read and consumed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not only
Oh,
that, like maybe I'd be 10 years ahead in my career because I just have all that knowledge like right away. Like I was, Jeff, it's Jeff is the Marvel Unlimited strip I do, and it's mostly wordless. Occasionally there are sort of icon balloons that have like his thoughts. Not a lot, but a little bit. And then occasionally, I think the only other words we say in it are Jeff or Jeffrey. And so I think no has been used a few times. Anyway, I was talking to my nephews about it, and I was sharing it with them and showing it to them, and they were looking and they're like, "Well, how are you writing it if there are no words?" And I was like, "Well, can you think about what I'm doing?" And the youngest one, Zach, they're both very smart, but Zach was like, "Because you're writing the actions, right?" And I was like, "Hey, yes." It was very impressive to me because he's never seen a comic strip. He's never like, I mean, a script. He's never
yeah.
thought about how to process that. It was great. It was amazing. It's those moments that make you go, huh, should I have had kids? And then a couple minutes later, you go, no, 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 they're
No.
very loud. This was a good
Yes,
choice.
they are. Yes. Yeah. If you at any point hear any noises, it's the kids are upstairs not going to bed like they should be. So was it at the transition then you fell in love with comics where you just decided you wanted to start writing? Was writing always a part of, your childhood, or, where did that kind of fit into your plan?
Yeah, I don't really know how it happened, but some of my earliest memories are wanting to write. And some of my earliest memories are being, gosh, 5 or 6, and making, not only writing, I wrote these stories about these mermaid sisters. And I not only wrote these stories, but then I made a construction paper book that I even did a cutout in the front of the pink construction paper so that there was a drawing inside. Like I was doing die cut books
So
and
good.
I was 5. So I always, when I talk about it, I talk about, I think the desire seemed to be not just to write,
Mm.
but to publish, to share. Like I believed that what I had made should be shared with people. I mean, I don't know how valid that is, but I do think that that is interesting. Like, for example, I was a terrible journaler. I would sometimes keep a journal. I would try to do it, diary, whatever. And then I would be embarrassed by it and horrified by it and like want to rewrite it and redraft it. And most of my journals ended up with all the pages torn out, thrown in the trash. You can even find it in my sketchbooks too. Like most artists they want to rework a page or they want to
Yeah.
see where it came from. No, this is embarrassing and it must be destroyed. So I was always about the revision, and I was always about, if it's not suitable for other people to ingest, I'm not that interested in it, I guess, which is interesting. So it was more like a reverse where I always wanted to draw, but I knew I wasn't skilled enough. Or maybe it was like I knew I wasn't skilled enough, plus I somehow had a sense of what it would take to be something like a painter, and I just knew that wasn't going to happen. And so it was more like when I discovered comics as a teenager, and I'm just sorry it didn't really connect when I was younger reading the Archies.
Right.
When I read the comics as a teenager, I was like, oh my God, this is a way. This is the writing and the art that I've been looking for to merge it together. And I think at that point, I still thought I would draw. I mean, I did end up going to art school. So, I did some drawing, but the more and the deeper I got into it, the more I could see that writing was where I belonged and I should stay there.
So good. So where then in your journey, when you discovered that you wanted to write and publish and get stuff out there and like you were saying, revising stuff, where was this took you into writing comics and getting your foot in the door, if you will, with publishing a comic?
So I went to SCAD, which is the Savannah College of Art and Design, which is sort of famous now, for many reasons, including being a college where you can get a sequential art degree. When I went, really nobody had it except for SCAD. I think SVA, they had comic classes, but not a major, and it was much more limited. And then the other option was the Joe Kubert School when I was a kid, but again, I wasn't enough of an artist and I knew it. And so
Yes.
that didn't seem like a fit. And also, I really wanted a degree and like a more traditional college experience. I wanted to try that, which is I ended up at U of A first, and then transferred to SCAD later. So, I mean, once I discovered comics, I mean, I was pretty intent, like, this is what I want to do. I have a great thing that I wish everyone in their life would get to have this moment, or a similar moment, I should say, because I had to know I was on the wrong path, basically. I was at U of A. I was going fine. I was studying art. I was taking a graphic design class that I really liked. And I was having a terrible time in illustration. That teacher hated me so much. And there was a great moment when he hated a thing I'd done, but a couple other students in the class really disagreed with him because like the execution was lacking, which is very true
Mm.
for that piece, but like it was super creative. And he got in a big fight with these students. It's truly one of my favorite memories is these other students advocating for what was great about this stupid thing I'd done. Anyway, very fun stuff. So I was at U of A. I was taking this graphic design class and we got an assignment to do, we were designing packaging and label and everything for a beer, I think it was. And you could do extra credit and design like the carrying case, like the 6-pack or whatever it was. So, it's a serious stuff. It's like you're designing the bottle. There's physical objects, not just like digital printout or whatever. But I really liked that assignment and I had a good idea. So I was like, I'm going to do the extra credit. So I'm doing my project. I take it in. Every single person did the extra credit. And I went home and I was like, here's the problem. I'm never going to be exceptional at this
Mm.
because they're all thinking about graphic design when they're not doing graphic design. And
Mm.
I'm thinking about comics when they're thinking about graphic design. And I had started taking a night class given by a local artist who ran the comic shop. It was called Captain Spiffy's. And so I was taking a night class learning about comics. And I was like, I'm never going to be great at graphic design because I'm thinking about comics when I'm supposed to be thinking
Mm.
about graphic design. And I was like, well, get yourself on the right path, God damn it, because you have nice parents who are not telling you you can't do it. Transfer to the other college and see if that's right. And so I did. And I wish more people could have that clear
Yeah.
cut a moment in their life because I feel like we all struggle with that. We all really swim around lost looking for a thing. And here I had the thing and I was just standing on the wrong
Yeah.
path. So it was a great, I feel very lucky. My brothers are not in creative fields. One of them is very geared creatively, the other one not so much, but neither of them really love their careers the way I do. Although one of them is certainly more successful and stable financially, no surprise. But he said, one of my brothers said to me one time that they wished they had had some clarity. They're like, because at least like at least that you're doing the thing that you should be doing. And I was like, yeah, there's a lot of things in my life that have not gone right, but that that one I nailed it.
Well, one of the things that I've talked to earlier, your characters and things that you create. And one of the reasons I reached out for this interview is I started to pick up Birds of Prey, which is a series I had never read before, really. I was familiar with a lot of the characters, but there was just something about the way these characters were written that I fell in love with them. If I didn't know them real well, I fell in love with them all over, or I fell in love with them for the first time. Like you have made me the biggest Big Barda fan ever now.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's might just be my mission statement of Birds of Prey. Make sure everyone knows how fucking cool Big Parda is.
You're doing a great job because I guarantee you, if you ask people like, "Who's your favorite character of Birds of Prey?" They're like, "Barda."
I do feel like it does seem to be working. Every once in a while, I see people who don't like my approach to her voice, where they're like, they think it feels off. I'll be honest, I don't think it feels off to the
Mm,
original Kirby stuff. Um, I'm sure it feels off. There have been a lot of takes over the years. I don't really think it's out of harmony with Tom King's stuff either. And I say that because it's one of my favorite books. So I would never like deliberately go into it and do a different voice. I'm sure it's a little different, the way we approach it, if only because they're very different projects. Like they
right.
have different demands. This is but my idea with her, and maybe this will make if anyone who's not on board with the way I do the voice, because I heard a couple people say, or I read a couple of people saying that she seems dumb, or like, why should she still be like a stranger on a strange land? Like
Mm,
she's been here a long time or whatever. And my answer to that is Barda doesn't assimilate. If anything, you assimilate to Barda, not the other way around. So like she's just uniquely wholly who she is. Like she isn't going to be influenced by other things. Like it would be really hard to win an argument with Barda, and that wouldn't be because you were wrong. It would just be because that's how she is. And I don't even mean that. I think it's a fun quirk of the character, but it's a
yeah,
strength as much as a weakness. That could really get in your way and be a problem. But a lot of it comes from this idea that her mind is so set, like we've talked about, and I didn't invent it. It's something that I took from the history of the character, is that you have to, that the mega rod, that weapon she carries all the time, it projects propaganda into your mind at all times that dark side is, the greatest thing since sliced bread, whatever, right?
right.
And so you have to have an incredibly strong mind to not even let that, that's like having another stream of conscious in your head that's saying a bunch of bullshit that you're not supposed to listen to. Do you know how incredible your drive and direction and will has to be to ignore another stream of conscious in your head? Like, so these are just like the cool things about
Yeah,
these characters that I try to get out there a little bit. And one of them is, yeah, Barda doesn't use your contractions, puny human, or like whatever, whatever it
yep.
is. Like she just is, she's gonna be different. She's gonna be oil to other people's water. And I like her that way. So the
Oh,
good news, the good news is other people seem to be on board.
all hands on this one. Like it's fantastic, and her interaction with Cassandra, or better known as Small Bat,
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
is delightful. Like so, where was it in this process of Birds of Prey? Were you able to pitch who you wanted, in the team when you got this book, or where did the idea of forming the team come about?
Yeah, I mean, Ben might have been crazy, but he just let me do what I want. And DC might have been crazy to let him just let me do what I want. But Ben was like, tell me what you want it to be. And I was like, well, I don't know if DC's ever going to let me write anything ever again. So I'm just going to grab all my favorite characters and my favorite book and try to jam them all into this thing. And like, this would be my big advocacy for changing up the roster, which I know people have a lot of feelings about.
Mm,
But, it's not like I came into the book knowing that Barda and Cass were going to be like that.
yeah.
I felt I knew their voices. Individually, I really know Dinah's voice. I have it on lock. I have Cass. I have Barda. I think I got Harley. I got her pretty quick. Zealot, yes. Honestly, I was most worried about maps because
Okay.
maintaining that optimism and that energy, but like putting it in an older, more mature human is tricky. I wanted to preserve that aspect of her, but it's hard to not make her seem like a child when you're doing that. So she was sort of the hardest, but individually I knew all of their voices. And so when you're pitching that, I'm not pitching Barta and Cass are going to become best friends. I mean, you can do that, but that wasn't in the outline. That's
Yeah.
just something magical that happened between the characters on the page when I started doing it. And you don't always know how that's going to happen. I mean, maybe writers who are much more prepared and well read and ahead than I am, maybe they know all those things. But for me, it's more a magical thing that happens when I know all my pieces and I've assembled them together for something. And then how they ricochet off of each other is truly what I'm in it for. I mean, honestly. And that's how you get things like Barta and Cass. And, I know people still are always going to want their faves. I feel the same way. That's why I put all my faves on the team. But I think that by experimenting a little bit and allowing different characters to ricochet off one another, sometimes that's how you get those really great things like Barta and Cass.
Oh, for sure. And now it seems like the Birds of Prey is kind of a revolving door a little bit, of like, you know, we'll do light spoilers, I guess. If you haven't read any Birds of Prey, first off, stop listening to us. Go read Birds of Prey and then come back. But like, Harley Quinn was in the first arc. You mentioned Harley.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen her, since that arc. I think we're up to issue 9 now.
Yeah.
So and is that kind of something that you aspired to have, of like kind of continuing to keep some core people and then rotating in new members?
Yeah, I mean, I do think the core idea of Birds of Prey, which we're slowly getting back to. I mean, we're in like a crazy arc where they're all trapped inside something. Spoiler alert, it's a pocket dimension. The which you're gonna find out soon. I don't think it's spoiling anything really. It's we
I
all
think,
know we all know they're in something weird.
yeah,
It's one of
you
those kind of
kind
things.
of figure it out.
I mean, it's one of the examples Dinah rattles off, although a really terrible new Danny the Street was one of my favorite jokes in that issue.
The Doom Patrol mention, I was like, oh, that's okay.
It's always fun when you can do stuff like that. Just to make it all feel a little connected, even just like in a tiny way. Anyway, so we'll be getting a little more back to what I do think the core of Birds of Prey is, which is more like Oracle as sort of mission control and like running missions that are more planned and less, holy shit, we're trying to save our skin, which is very
Right.
much what's going on in this arc. Um, and so, I mean, I do think that it's very key to who the Birds of Prey are, that you roll people on and off mission dependent. The
Mhm.
problem with that is I'm now very attached to five key members: Barbara, Dinah, Barda, Cass, and Sin. So that's a pretty full team already,
Right.
which limits us. So um we'll see. We'll see. The next arc is after this one is a 4-issue arc, and it's rolling on at least 2 new players, but Vixen is probably going to have to roll off for that to happen. So it's gonna get hard.
Yeah.
It's gonna get a little tricky because I'm emotionally attaching to these, and I hope people are too.
Yeah.
But the core idea is to keep it rolling a little bit. It's
Yeah.
going to be very hard the day that I have to roll off Barta or Cass, even if only temporarily. But I don't know. The thing I would say is I'm just hoping we can get a really long run, because if we can get a really long run, it will feel okay rolling people on and off because they'll be back. But,
Right.
you know, like for example, this will be very popular and unpopular at the same time. I would like to bring Harley back, but I don't want to bring her back right away. Like I'd like to bring her back in the 20s, but
Yeah.
will we get there? We'll see,
Well,
so.
everyone listening needs to be reading Birds of Prey so we get there, gang. Okay. Like, this is now just the Birds of Prey hype train, to continue
Well,
bringing
I
them
will
on.
say, it's hard for any of us to follow up what Leo was doing.
Mhm.
So incredible. But I did try, for everyone's benefit, the book, the readers, me, the artists, everyone. I did try to write this arc with this portal arc, to lean really heavily into artist strengths and to try to like get the most possible fun out of it. You know, when you have to use multiple artists for whatever reason, like if you can lean into that and say, well, this world just looks like this, then you know, I just think you're making something a little more interesting. You're trying to take a strength or a weakness and turn it into a strength. And I hope we've done that. But it does require that the fans be a little open-minded about, you know, you're not going to have perfect expected art in every panel, because it's going to be a little wilder and more
Right.
unexpected than that, and try to enjoy the ride, you know?
For sure. So you mentioned earlier that you said you found the voice of a lot of these characters. How was that process? Because to me, this seems like you're writing a lot of these characters for the first time. Is it just your familiarity with them as who they are? How much research did you do into kind of like how did you discover these voices of these characters?
I mean, I think mostly it's just from reading over the
Okay.
years, and then doing probably a more intense section of research when you're narrowing down some characters that you're talking about. I mean, like I've read every appearance of Sin, for example, because she was a child in Birds of Prey. So like that's pretty easy. Like how do I take that voice and age it up? And like what would it be like if you're, you know, living, growing up as the sort of sister of one of the most famous superheroes in the world, but you're trapped with monks every day, and you're like the most well-read teenager on earth because there's no television, there's no video games. Like, what are you doing? So like, what does that look like, and how does that person process? So like, that's part of the trick for that. With Barda, I look at mostly a lot of the Kirby stuff and then the Tom King stuff, because I love that, and like sort of find my way, you know. But I do think like too much research can get you in trouble, and especially with comics, you know, i- you could definitely read some comics and decide that Cass has a different voice and likes to talk all the time and quip and shit. Like people have written that for her, but I don't believe in that version. And so, you know, I just think there's a point at which reading a character, reading a take you really like on a character, really gels about who
Right.
they are in your mind. I think it must happen for fans too, which is why they get so upset when they feel like it's wrong, because it doesn't gel with what they've decided it should sound like. And listen, it's a fine art because not everybody agrees, but you know, you'll get a note from an editor and they're like, this sounds off voice. And you're like, yeah, I agree. I mean, we had that with Cass um, on, that was actually how we ended up with a 25-page first issue,
Mm,
was because that whole scene where she's telling the flashback of how Harley almost beat her this one time, and that she's chaos and you can't predict her, and you know, all this stuff. But so when I wrote that the first time, it was narrated by Cass. And Ben came back when it was time to do notes on the first issue. He was like, "This is an incredible first issue." He's like, "I'd say the only parts, you know, blah blah blah, this, and I think Cass is too vote." I was like, 100%. I was like, "I hate it. It cannot be this." I was like, "But I had to get it into you, and I thought maybe you could help me." I was like, "I'll be honest, I have the perfect solution, but I need 2 extra pages." And he goes, "What is it?" And I pitched it to him, and he's like, "Okay, how about 3?" And so what that did was that allowed me to tell the flashback without any narration. And then we get the page where it's a joke about, hey, you shouldn't tell stories, you're
you
really
know,
bad at that. And then you get her explaining what the story was supposed to be, which is, hey, she almost beat me this time. If you're looking for an X factor, I think Harley's your girl, you know, or whatever.
yeah.
And so it, you know, it took a thing that instead of being out of character, is one of my favorite things about that issue, that you get like a little mini adventure right in the middle
Mm.
of it, and that it all speaks to the character. But you know, they don't always give you 3 extra pages. And sometimes your artist will murder you if you got 3 extra pages. So yeah, sure, that took you a day, that's going to take me a week. Great, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks for these extra
Yeah,
pages.
thanks for these extra pages, extra work.
But it works. It
So
works.
yeah,
You get to tell the story you wanted to tell, and and use something that people are used to, but then kind of flip it on its head a little bit by getting to put
yeah,
your own spin on it, which is fantastic.
yeah, it was great. It was it's a really, that's the dream team. It's honestly been really hard to keep doing the book without Leo and Ben.
Mm.
I love it. And Jordy and I are still having a great time, and Jessica has been great. But yeah, that was like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Things just really come together, and it feels like magic, and you sort of get addicted to it, and it's very hard to let it go. Um, but it's comics, man.
Yeah, it is.
You
And
got to keep moving or die.
yeah. Well, and I appreciate, like, there's so many, like you said, that moment with, Cass talking about Harley Quinn, and then, like, like, you've always at the end of these issues kind of been like, here's what's coming next. And I want to say it was like the issue 7 or something, like at the very end, where it's like, here's what's coming next. You're like, I already have them in their underwear. What more do you want? They're like, it's just those moments of levity that I'm just like, that's so good. So we've talked a lot about Birds of Prey. And when we were setting up this interview, one of the things that got announced afterwards is that you were going to dip your toe now in the Energon universe,
Yes.
doing Scarlett. How did that come about?
I mean, I just got really lucky. I do feel like, we were talking a lot about, making it known what kind of stories you do. And I do think this is the kind of story I do. And so that's how my name gets on the top of that list when they're thinking about it. And I'm really grateful, because I'm super grateful to be considered for something like that. Scarlett, I've said this in a print interview, I think. I mean, she probably really is like my first sort of geek crush,
Mm,
because I'm trying to think of anything sort of in the geek space that would have come before GI Joe, and she's a really formative memory for me in that cartoon, and already at that age as a girl, you realize when you're watching things that are more boy coded, like you'll be lucky to get one female character here, and hopefully she's cool. And on Scarlet, I felt like they really did a good job of that,
mm,
because, you got some more characters later, Lady J and CoverGirl, who I feel meh about, but whatever. But Scarlet was a great character right out of the jump. I mean, they really helped her popularity, probably by connecting her to some of the other most popular characters, Snake Eyes, obviously, Storm Shadow, these are some of the most popular characters around. And so, her stories heavily involving them, I think, helped her. But I really never felt like she was swallowed by it, which she could have easily been swallowed by the popularity that is Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and all of that. But I felt like she really held her own, man. I don't know, maybe just she was such a cute redhead. We all had crushes on her, so you want her to go the distance. But yeah, it was a very formative thing for me. So to be able to come in and like carve that out, a new Scarlet in a universe and a publication line that's really incredible and like going so strong. Yeah, it feels really good to be like you're putting that stamp on who she's going to be going forward, and starting that ball rolling. It's exciting.
yeah. Well, and then one of my questions was going to be like, did you watch the GI Joe stuff growing up, and you're like right off the bat, like, yeah, like you were
Oh
very
yeah.
familiar.
Oh yeah. My mom did, oh, I don't want to say that. I don't want to get her in trouble with GI Joe fans. She was not a fan of Shipwreck, and there were some problems there, which
Um,
honestly, good on my mom, because as a kid I was mad at her, but if you watch some of that stuff back, yeah, he needed a bit of a talking to. She's right.
oh, now I'm gonna have to go back and watch. It's so good. So
Bit of a misogynist a little bit.
what can you tell us about, your approach with this story? I know it's coming out this summer. Where can what can people expect from this?
So the Scarlet book, it is a little hard to talk about.
Yeah.
I feel like I should be able to talk about more, because we're really less than a month out. I think it comes out like the first or second week of June. So we're getting close, but I do feel like, because I don't know, the Energon universe, I just am very careful with its
Yeah.
secrets, I guess. I don't know. So we've got a 5-issue story. It connects to the other Energon stuff in the sense that we're trying to build a world here and we want it to connect. So, but if you're like not sure, you're into the full, like you like GI Joe but you don't like Transformers or something, Scarlet should be new reader friendly. You should be
Okay.
able to read it alone. Hopefully if you do that, it'll be good enough and it'll give you enough teases of other stuff that's going on that might excite you, because I think some stuff is really cool that they're building. I mean, Void Rivals, I'll be honest, that's really the big thing that they were able to get me. Obviously I was interested in writing Scarlet, but I would have been pretty hesitant given past iterations of the Joes.
Mm,
But that Void Rivals really showed that they were really trying to do something different and they were building toward a much bigger future than like a quick cash grab, which is what you want when you're talking about investing a bunch of your time into some new property. So I was pretty pumped about it.
yeah.
And like the Duke, it was so good. It was so good. Didn't have any right to be that good. I mean, I don't know why I would doubt Joshua Williamson and Tom Riley and Jordy Belair. Like I should have just shut up. But like I was so into it. And I was a little annoyed with them for making it that good because it's a hard act to follow. But Marco Ferrari is working on this Scarlet with us, and Lee Lowridge, great colors.
Mm.
I think Scarlett's mission, gosh, how much can I say? I'm not very practiced at talking about this. I apologize.
You're fine.
She's basically on a suicide mission. Like you would have to be insane to go on the mission that she gets sent on by a developing Joe. She's not a Joe. That's sort of a thing that's building in
Mm,
the larger universe. And so she'll be, so this is sort of setting her up to be a part of that. But so the reason she goes on this mission is incredibly personal.
mm.
So there's some real personal stakes set in. There's Jinx and Storm Shadow will definitely be in the book. Not sure how much I'm able to say about others. Oh, but I did see the poster is out there that shows Snow Job, so he shows up too. Um, and yeah, it's incredible. We're having a really good time. Scarlett is incredibly capable to a possibly insane degree, as these stories like to do. And in issue 3, she has just an absolutely insane issue where it's sort of like Dread style, where it's like all in one location. So like
Okay.
it's like a sustained fight action scene. So really fun. We're having a lot of fun. And Marco brings such like a high energy. Like I feel like when I started writing it, I felt like it was a little more like Bond, Mission Impossible vibes, like a little more like serious
Yeah.
spy stuff. But Marco brings a real chaotic energy that makes it feel a little more like John Wick-ish, like more buttoned up than
Yeah.
John Wick, but like
Yeah.
more revenge, more personal, a little more wild, and it's fun. It's been really fun.
And listen, I'm so excited, and I can 100% respect like the secrecy a little bit because as a interviewer, I want to know, but also as a reader, I don't want to know. Like
Yeah, that's
Void
true too. That's
Void
true too.
Rivals was one of those. I was surprised. I picked it up, and that was one of the best kept surprises in comics because I don't think they can get away with that very often. So
Yeah, that's
I
true.
didn't know it was tied into Transformers and things like that and stuff. So to get to now see this world developing with the mini GI Joe series and even announcing like it was they'd been doing they didn't say they were going to do an onslaught of these. So I'm really
Yeah,
excited this summer.
yeah, yeah. Well, and knowing, I we don't have recurring like Energon universe uh excuse me, like meetings or whatever, but we did have like a writer's room kind of meeting when we were
Mm,
kicking it off, and like so much of the cool stuff that's coming from the stuff that Josh was doing. And that's another thing, is that Joshua feels like, man, I mean, is he the number one GI Joe? Like he's such the perfect guy to have in that room,
seems
like
like it.
really, really leading the way. Like he's so into it. It's great. But yeah, the stuff that I know is coming in like Destro and everything. It's very cool stuff.
And I want to respect your time, but I would be
Oh
remiss if
yeah.
I didn't talk. We're getting another arc of Black Cloak, which is just a delight because that first it was like you said, fantasy and kind of a crime whole story. Was that a plan from the get go that you're going to do more? Just did you have these stories in your head, or was it kind of like a wait and see, and then when response was there, you're like, all right, let's get some more.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, the market is just so tough. Like
Yeah.
to do more, we just had to see how the first bit went, and it went really well, but it's pretty tight to do it now. So it's taking us longer to do it, and it's been a little frustrating for both of us.
Yeah.
But honestly, that world is so incredible. I think it speaks to the quality of Black Cloak that even though the numbers didn't really back us up to do more, they were pretty soft. And a lot of those numbers go up over time because you're
Mm.
building trades and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Like, you hope your second series you get a renewed interest because people have picked up the trade in the meantime. So like there's a whole art to all of this that I don't really understand, by the way. But I just think it spoke to the quality of it that we were willing to do it even though the financial piece wasn't what we hoped it would be. So
Yeah.
like doing it for reduced rates, like I don't know, I don't want to tell anyone to do that because working for promotion isn't good, but working on something you love and you care about that you believe in, there's some value in that
Yeah.
even when the financial picture isn't as great as you'd like it to be. So I'm hoping we're going to get to keep doing it and that it's going to keep growing and building. And I wish it would stratosphere into a saga like hit, but those are incredibly rare.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with even a modest hit that we could get up into the 20s or something. I'd feel really great about that.
Well,
There's a
yeah,
lot
I
of
get it.
story to tell in there.
And I'm excited to get to explore this universe a little bit more. So I hope it does what you are wanting it to do.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's wild. Like there's a time skip, there's like a 5-year time skip to the next issue, so things are dramatically different.
Okay.
It's pretty wild. It's great.
That's so good. So, well, I do want to respect your time. We've talked a lot about comics, and this has been so much fun. I hesitate to ask, you got anything else that you are working on that you want to mention real quick?
I don't think I have anything I can mention. I have something big that's going to be announced in June or July.
Okay.
Um and then let's see, Scarlett, Powerpuff Girls, Black Cloak, um Birds of Prey. Yeah, everything else is still on lockdown. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So, well, Kelly, where can people follow along with you and stay up to date so that way when these announcements do happen that they get to hear them and
Sure, sure. The best place to find me now is honestly on Substack. That's 1979 semifinalist.substack.com. I am still on Twitter and I'm on Bluesky now. But it's so hard. Everything gets throttled in there. So if you really want to know what I'm up to and what I'm doing, this newsletter is a great way to stay in touch. There's a free option where you just get it maybe once or twice a month. And then there's a paid option where you get behind the scenes stuff and process stuff and comics if we're making some, like Black Cloak will be on there. And there's also a prose thing that I'm working on that I had hoped would debut already, but it looks like it'll debut this summer sometime, which
okay.
is it's sort of like a choose your path story where I'm sort of writing it in real time with the audience. So like we put up a chapter and then they have an X amount of time to read it and vote. And then I start on the next chapter. So we'll see.
Wow.
It's an experiment. I think
Wow.
part of the problem is that it's I'm really love the project now, which happens to me with a lot of things that I put time in. I really start falling in love with the characters and stuff. And so I started not wanting to do it as sort of quick and dirty as we were trying to do it. So it's taking a little more planning to get it right, but I'm pretty excited about it. That's called Margot and Layla Must Die for people who need to know.
That sounds it sounds right up my alley. So, well, Kelly, this has been so much fun getting to sit down and talk about comics with you. You are when I see your name on a book, I have to check it out. You are
Thank
a
you so
fantastic
much.
writer. Gang, if you have not checked out any of these series, again, go to your shop, pick them up. You won't be disappointed. But make sure you check out the links. The Substack will be in the description of this video, or if you're listening via the podcast, uh, click on the description so you can get those notes so you can find out how to follow along with everything and stay up to date with what Kelly is working on. So, Kelly, thanks again so much just for taking some time to talk comics with me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was great.
Absolutely. And with that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out.